Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week, we've got a combination we've seen a few times since the GT Sport days, but this time around, things are a little bit different. Tire wear actually comes into play, and that is a factor when it comes to deciding what the anti-meta car is. Let's get into it. This week's anti-meta car is the silly French car that I can't pronounce. Citroën. I can't do it, I'm so sorry, I tried really hard. But anyways, the car handles incredibly well, it's got really good grip, it handles the curbs really well, and best of all, it doesn't have to pit for tires while most other cars, especially the other fast ones, do. And that is why I selected it for the anti-meta car of the week. Group 4 class is looking pretty balanced at Kyoto, but the 650S is very clearly the meta car. I managed to get a 0.6 with this car. You can see that Drifter got a 0.2, and lots of different cars are actually able to set pretty good times, but when it comes to the race pace, the fact that this car doesn't need tires means that this is a really easy choice for the anti-meta car of the week. I like to go all the way up in the curb to get as wide as possible for the entry to T1, but there's also an argument to be made for not using the curb because it can upset the car's balance as you come off of it. I like using this post here on the right, but there's also a dark mark on the curb right here, and you can also just estimate based on how far you are from the 50-meter board. As you know, I like taking advantage of Gran Turismo's magic ABS, so I go full brake as I turn in, and I try to get to second gear before I get my nose to the beginning of the curb on the left. These dark tire marks here are a good place to apex, and then I like to get all the way on the throttle as soon as possible, of course, in second gear, tracking out all the way onto this exit curbing. Be careful not to let your tires go into the grass because you can get stuck on the other side of that curb. As I get onto the curb, I want you to take note of the fact that I missed the very beginning of the curb because it's slightly steeper than going up onto the side of it. I brake right before the 50-meter board here, but I want you to notice that I don't go to full brakes on this specific corner. You've got to turn in really early, which means you've got to start trail braking really early too. I want you to note two things. One, how I'm going to try to go straight through this corner, and two, how I'm going to neutralize my steering as I come off the curbs. We're actually going to go over that in a little bit more depth after we get past this part. Make sure you're already turning left by the time you hit this curb so you've got enough suspension travel on the left side of your car to not bounce wildly off the side of it. There are three main things that I like to focus on to make sure that I can consistently get over the curbs without spinning out. The most important, however, is making sure that you straighten your steering wheel when you come off the curb and bounce back onto the track. If your steering wheel is turned, your car is going to start going the direction that you're turning, of course, and that can really easily make you spin out. Balancing your car with the throttle so you don't have too much weight coming onto the front tires when you come off the curb, as well as making sure you're fully over the curb and not just catching the side are the other two things. For the next corner, I actually completely avoid using the curb. I'm going to use the 50-meter board on the left as my braking point, and I'm going to briefly get to 100% brakes, and then when I get to third gear, I'm going to start turning in. Get yourself to second really quickly, get off the brakes, and turn in even more to make sure you get up on the curb and then get fully on the throttle all the way to the exit. Again, avoid going past the curb and make sure you come all the way off the curb before you get to the grass on the exit here. Keeping in mind the tips that I gave you for the first high curb section, we're going to use all of that for this really tricky S. This is probably the hardest part of the track. As you're turning in, to ensure that you can get all the way onto the curb, start lifting off the throttle gently. When you get to the end of the curb on the right, that's when we want to hit the brakes, and we should be aimed just to the right of the first apex. Stay in fifth, gently trail brake and turn in so we can aim over the curb like we did on the first one. And after you get past the first curb, straighten the steering wheel, downshift to fourth, and then get back on the throttle doing the same thing with the exit curbing. Maintain enough throttle that the car is balanced front and back by the time you get off the curb, and then do all of your steering after your car is settled, making sure you don't go over this curb here. That one's going to take a lot of practice to get consistent. Once again, to give a better visualization of exactly what I mean by neutralizing the steering, I want you to watch the direction of the wheels as I come off the curb. You're going to see that I go neutral. I try to straighten the wheel as I come off and hit the pavement to make sure that the car just keeps going the direction of the momentum. I go from steering left to straight to right really quickly between the curbs, but as I hit the pavement in the middle, that's when the tires are straight. A really common rookie mistake for this left-handed kink is going all the way right to try to maximize as much of the track as possible, but for a kink like that, it's not really necessary. The 50-meter board on the left is where we're going to turn in, but we're going to stay full throttle until we get to the end of the curb on the left. Right before you get to the dark blue part of the track, you want to brake just gently enough that you can stay hugging the inside of the curb. Now, I had to use a little bit of maintenance throttle because I think I could have actually gone deeper into that corner. This pole here on the right is a good indicator of when you want to get all the way on the throttle and all the way up on the curb to apex for the exit. Keeping that pole in mind for where you want to apex and exit is a really good way to avoid going into the grass on the exit. If you touch the grass on the exit, it's going to suck you all the way into that wall. This next high-speed section is almost as tricky as the slower S, so be really careful here. Turn in when you get to the marshals there on the right, and we're going to make sure we hit the center of this curb here. Continue turning left past that apex, and right before you get to the marshals here on the left, that's when we're going to start turning into the right here. Lift off the throttle so you can get up all the way on the curb and continue turning until, again, we hit the marshals. Lift as you turn in to get the weight to shift really quickly, but not too quickly, but you want to make sure that the weight is solidly on the right tires before you get on the curb. Once you see a straight line through the curbing, you want to go full throttle and go all the way to the exit right here. Don't be tempted to go super late into this corner. You want to actually stay really tight. I use the 50-meter board and I actually fully turn in and get off the curb before we get to the 50-meter mark. This corner is so long, by taking a wide line, you're going to add tremendous amounts of time to your lap. Once I'm fully off the curb, that's when I start scrubbing off just a little bit of speed, getting down to 5th and then 4th, and my goal is to stay within about a car width of the dark blue part of the track. When you get fully off the brakes, continue turning in, and we're going to look for these green bleachers on the left. That is our indicator to get back on the throttle. Make sure as you're getting on the throttle that you get on the throttle gently enough that it doesn't affect the trajectory of the car whatsoever, and continue turning in the entire time. As you're exiting, if it looks like you're not aimed at the marshals by the time you get to the curb, then you need to lift. Like every other curb, if you go too far and you touch your tires onto the grass whatsoever, you're going to get stuck on that part of the curb and it's going to ruin your entire lap, so avoid that. And let's go over it in full speed. If you struggle with T1, I do suggest trying it without using the curb at all. As a general rule, if you go beyond like half the width of the track on the entry, then you're probably going too far and wasting some time. Try to remember the tips and the tricks with this curb here. We're going to stay a little bit on the throttle, we're going to attack it and go straight line over it, and we're going to try not to steer as we are coming off the curb. Feel free to use the curb on the left, but I just completely avoid it. If you're actually trying to race someone, it might be advantageous to get a better angle coming out, but I like to just avoid it in general. I was using 3rd gear to exit, but I think 2nd gear is definitely better with this car. As you're turning right here, your front tires are going to lose a little bit of the bite, and that's a good time to note when you want to lift off the throttle to get the car tucked in. Like most S's, and of course with the curbs here, you want to essentially just try to turn as little as possible, going as close to a straight line as you can through that entire section. I think you can carry actually a lot more speed into this corner, but make sure you're going full throttle as you first enter and stay really close to it. You don't really need to go wide because you can get on the throttle and continue turning since it's uphill. You have a lot of grip, especially with this car. Like I've said before, you don't want to hit the front edge of any of the curbs. This is especially important right here because it will send you flying. If you can get the weight transferred onto the side of the car that is not on the curb, that can also give more suspension travel for the part of the car that is on the curb, and that'll allow it to go more smoothly over the curb. This is another corner where you don't want to go really wide. Since it's so long, it's just going to add a tremendous amount of time. And of course, don't touch the grass on any of the exits. It'll pull you directly into the grass and into the wall and ruin your lap. There you go. So I knew really quickly, as soon as I started doing this race on stream, that this car was going to be the anti-meta car. There are actually a lot of cars that can maintain a really good pace that are not the 650S, so a lot of really fast cars that are potential anti-meta cars, but this car has one very specific attribute that makes it head and shoulders above all the rest. In previous iterations of this race, the strategy was really interesting. It was kind of like a rallycross race with a joker lap that you could choose to use at any time during the race. You have to do a pit stop, that's required, but tire changes are not required, which meant that if you were starting towards the back, it would make a lot of sense to just pit as soon as you possibly can, and then you'd have free air, and if you're at the front, then what you would do is you'd pit at the last possible moment to make sure that you don't have to encounter any kind of traffic whatsoever. Now, tire changing doesn't take a lot of time, but it still takes somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds, I believe. And that 3 and 5 seconds, as you know, is an eternity on a racetrack. So all of the other cars, or at least the vast majority of the other cars, need to take tires in order to maintain a good pace. But this car does not need to change tires to keep up with the really good pace that it has at the beginning of the race. Now, if you've done this race, or if you've done this time trial, you probably know how difficult this very first corner is where you have to go over the curb like this, and you'll know that a lot of people make big mistakes here, or at the very least go really slowly there. So I usually check up and try to go slow, but I also realized that there are a lot of really fast drivers here, and I expected them not to make mistakes, so we just went as fast as we could. Our buddy Damien was in the 8.6, and at the time I didn't realize how dangerous that car is. I ended up trying that car because I wanted it to be good, because as a lot of you know, I just bought a GR86, and it is the most deadly car that I think I've ever used in any of the race combinations that I've ever done in Gran Turismo. And that's not an exaggeration. I spun, I believe, 8 of the 10 laps going over the curbs. That car is not built for this, and I do not know how Damien even finished the race. Consummate stream enjoyer Rataka is in front of us, and I actually wasn't planning on making an overtake here. That's just how I take that corner. And I'm not sure if he was just letting me go or if he goes wide there, but making sure that you stay tight there can really get you some overtakes, because a lot of people actually go super wide there. If you're racing people that you do not know, this is another part of track. This is the third part essentially that I would actually check up if I was racing against people I didn't know, because it's very easy to make a mistake there, and the mistakes there can be just disastrous. I wasn't trying to make an overtake here. I actually had just made a mistake and didn't realize how tight I could stay while maintaining my speed, but luckily, since I did take the outside line there, I was able to maintain a higher speed than Rataka and retain my position. The downside was that I couldn't go into the pits on the first lap and get the really awesome undercut. Now, I'm not sure exactly what happened to our buddy J-Funk, but that was actually a really scary moment. That's the kind of thing where you see big accidents in real life, when you don't realize that there's a car 2 cars ahead of you that is going much slower or stopped. But luckily, 1, this is a sim, and 2, luckily J-Funk wasn't completely stopped. But we love J-Funk. Shout out to J-Funk, he's wonderful. Also, if it were a random person, I definitely wouldn't have gone even that long side by side, but it was Rataka. I knew he wouldn't punt me or anything like that. So it's kind of fun going through the really dangerous corners side by side with people that you trust, because it really tests the limit of your control. Anyways, it's just a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff. Now, even if you really trust the people in front of you, if there's a mix of people you trust and you don't, then you want to give extra space. And so I made the mistake of staying too close to Rataka, and One Clever Name was really slow through there, so I did bump Rataka, and I felt bad about that. I didn't want to take the position, so I just gave him the bump draft right there so we can maintain our positions and also maintain our momentum. I keep calling him Rataka. His name in here is Gunna, so I want you to pay attention to how fast Gunna went through this corner. He carried a lot more speed through there, and he was able to maintain it on the other side of the corner, so that's kind of something to think about when you're doing the TT as well. You can carry a tremendous amount of speed around that corner and still not go off. Speaking of going off, if you see someone miss the apex there, that means they're not going to be able to hit this one, and this is going to happen almost every single time. We narrowly avoided it, but that was all thanks to Gunna's being able to control the car and move out of the way, so shout out to Rataka. I keep switching back and forth. Gunna, Rataka, it's him. You get it. Now, I try not to call people out by name too much in these videos, but One Clever Name has been difficult to race against. And I also knew that I was going to be much faster than him, so there was no way that I was going to try to follow him through another lap, and now it was time to go into the pits. I want to leave the whole pit stop in so you can see how quickly you can get in and out if you're not changing tires, but also, look at this exit. That's exactly where people are trying to brake, so be very careful both entering that corner as well as exiting the pits. It's a really crazy design. This is a PD designed track. This is a fictional track, and so I'm pretty sure that when they make the tracks, they have in mind that they're going to make them go both directions, but it seems like that was kind of an oversight with the position, but it's okay. Just be really careful there, because you can definitely cause accidents, but at the very least, you get ghosting. Now, in front qualify had a half-second penalty, so I knew that if I can stay pretty close to him, I would be able to take his position, and he's also a really fast driver, so I was really comfortable trying to get close. Behind me, you'll notice a couple screen names. One we've got, I believe it's pronounced Gojigen. He calls it 5 Ziggin, and I make fun of him for it, but that's Randy. You may know him as R. Haywood in the single-player AI races, and that's going to come into play later. I haven't forgotten Randy. Anyways, if you want to know who ACM Hatsim is, just read his name backwards. The benefit of the Mega Undercut is actually also one of the worst things about it, because I love racing. I love racing side by side, and in order to win from the back, a lot of the times you have to use a strategy that just makes you avoid side by side racing, and that really is exactly what the undercut does with this. So by going really quickly when there's no one around you, other people have to go in the pits later on, and they lose a little bit more time, as well as losing more time battling other people, so by the time they go into the pits, they're just nowhere around you. We were able to get some side-by-side action with Germain, but then we pulled up on Grove Street. If you know me, you probably know Grove Street. He is another top split and second split driver that you can see in the North and South America regions, and he's a very good driver. So with him in the meta car, I knew that we were going to have a really good battle, so started to go for it. He made a little bit of a mistake there, and I was really comfortable getting really close to him afterwards, so I didn't try to check up much because Grove doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and Grove is quick. You can pretty much count on him to have good pace, so it's the kind of thing that, one, can leave you feeling confident staying close, but two, it also means that it's going to be really difficult to make any kind of move on him. Looking in the rear view, you can see that Germain was still well within the slipstream range, and Randy was also right behind him. Rotaka had also made up some positions after making that mistake, and so he was right behind Randy as well, so I knew that if I tried to do anything desperate on Mike, one, it probably wouldn't work, and two, it was just going to slow us down, and so it would give those guys an opportunity. And going through the S's, he actually made a lot of time on me, so I didn't really have any opportunity to do anything like that. So again, we're just going to refocus, try to get really close to Mike, position ourselves in a place where we can make a move, and try to stay safe, of course. In GT7, the slipstream is really powerful. I don't actually know how powerful it is compared to real life, but it seems like it's a lot more powerful than real life. But I also know that the dirty air is more ridiculous than real life, so I guess it's kind of a balance. When you're in the dirty air, you have less aerodynamics to help you control the car, obviously, and also less to help you stop the car, so you end up wearing the tires a lot more. On top of that, you have to make some deliberate decisions to change the line and exit and enter corners a little bit differently to make sure that you don't just go off track, because you can't follow the exact same line. But if you are able to do that, then you can stay close and position yourself after using the slipstream. I kind of went into this corner not really having any kind of plan, but when I realized that he was really close before the apex, I decided to try to pull off the switcheroo. I almost ran into him though, and I was going to feel really bad, so I was really glad I didn't hit him. Now the plan here is never to go side by side, but him having a compromised entry meant that his exit speed was most likely going to be a lot worse, and that's exactly what happened. I was able to just barely get some overlap before the braking zone, braked a little bit later, dove for the apex, and I was able to stay cleanly on the inside. We did make a little bit of contact, but I think that was just from him turning in a little bit too tight. That's something you kind of have to do in Gran Turismo. If you make any contact, you're probably going to bounce because for whatever reason the cars bounce off of each other. So if someone's on the outside, you can expect them to make a little bit of contact, but as long as they're not trying to like slam into you, it's just so they can stay close. So Mike wasn't trying to hit me. I obviously wasn't trying to hit him since I gave him more than a car's width. And yeah, that's how you do it cleanly. Another trick that you can see really often is when someone is making a pass, if you can stick closely enough on their bumper, then the person that's being passed isn't going to be able to move back in front of you. And so that's exactly what Randy did. So Randy and I were both able to get past Mike in that corner. Now I mentioned before that Randy was going to be a factor. If you don't know Randy, obviously I mentioned that he's in the game. R. Haywood, you've probably raced against him if you raced against the AI. He is an incredible driver. I've been racing against him since just about the beginning of Gran Turismo Sport. I've known about him because he's been fast since long before that, and I was driving with my eyes in the rear view, which meant that I made a really big mistake, and when Randy has this kind of run on you, there's pretty much nothing you can do. As you can expect, he squeezed until the last moment, so I just tried to be as brave as I possibly could, maintain my position in front of Mike, and then stay as close to Randy as I could. Taking a moment to brag for Randy, at the very first Porsche GT Cup that was in Indianapolis last year, Randy won the entire thing, so he is the one and only Porsche Gran Turismo Cup winner. He's also been to many of the World Tour events. He's just a fantastic driver. Now with Mike in the meta car on the attack, I knew I had to defend as much as I possibly could, but that also meant that Randy was going to get away, so it's a really tough balance when you have a fast driver behind you trying to make a move, and you're also trying to chase down a really fast driver. If you remember in the lap guide, I talked about gently getting off the throttle there, because if you're going too fast and you get on the brakes while steering, then you can get some oversteer like Randy did, but it wasn't too much for him to handle. With Randy making that slight mistake and Mike making a bigger mistake, it was just Randy versus me. Now, in the moments leading up to the end of this race, I'd like to mention that when friends race each other, anything goes. And so, if what happened at the end of this race was between two strangers, that would obviously be a much different story. But Randy's my friend. Randy's my buddy. And so, You'll see what I'm talking about. Randy missed that apex. I adjusted for it. He did not. He did save the car, but that gave him a 1-second penalty. He, of course, went to defend, and I just knew that if I could stay behind him, if I can stay within 1 second, then I'd have the podium position. Of course, Randy knew that was going to happen too, so he wasn't going to let that slide. I didn't realize it until we went over the finish line, but he was able actually to break away more than a second, and he maintained the podium position. And just so you know that I don't hate Randy, I'm going to show you the live reaction from the stream. Randy, it's f***ing bomb sight time, bro. I hope you're ready. Oh, shit. I was only lying. What are the chances? You brake checking me, Randy? No! No! That's it! Wait! Wait! Was he actually a full second ahead? Randy, you piece of shit! That's it! That's it! Randy. Randy. Now, Randy, I told you I was coming for you. I told you that was it, didn't I? I did. I told you on stream in front of everyone that I was coming for you. You better believe I did, because I've got special access to you, don't I? In fact, anyone that has Gran Turismo 7 has special access, because we can find you. We can find the AI version of Randy in many, many races, and you better believe that I did. I did. You want to see what I did? Thank you again for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell all of your friends about it. Share it everywhere you possibly can. And keep your eye out for a few new Gran Turismo themed videos coming out pretty soon. Thank you.